Dr. Rima, we are live.
Welcome to the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. My name is Rima Ilebo, MD. I am the Medical Director of the Natural Solutions Foundation. And with me, as always, is my co-host and co-trustee, Ralph Fusatola. Good evening, Ralph.
Good evening, Dr. Rima. Great pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations. And today we have a lot to talk about.
Oh, we do.
But we absolutely do. Hot news that could literally impact the lives or speed the deaths of every single person listening to this show, everyone they connect with, and everyone out beyond them. But before we talk about that, I want everyone to pay attention to this message. This is listener-supported radio. The Dr. Rima Truth Reports is brought to you without commercials during the hour long. There's a commercial break at the top of every hour. And it's an uncensored radio station. Now, the Dr. Rima Truth Reports has been thrown off supposedly uncensored radio stations because we made people too uncomfortable by getting too close to the bare bones of the truth. That's different here at Revolution Radio. We are truly free to say what we believe. But that means that Revolution Radio, which, by the way, had its YouTube account killed, because too many people were saying too many things, Revolution Radio needs your support. If you will go to www.freedomslips.com/support.htm and make a donation, you'll be serving yourself, because uncensored news, uncensored views, uncensored truth is in short supply. That's www.freedomslips.com/support.htm. That's important. And it's up to you. It's not up to your neighbor. It's not up to the guy down the street. It's up to you. And we have some other things that are up to you. This Dr. Rima Truth Report radio. As you know, our first focus is always health freedom news. And boy, oh boy, do we have some health freedom news for you. This could literally change your world, rock your life. In our second hour, we'll be talking with the astonishingly knowledgeable and coherent and cogent and clear Dane Wigington, who's going to make excellent sense out of the insanity of California's manipulated weather. It's always a great pleasure and honor to have Dane as our guest. But right now, we have to tell you something that's not a great pleasure and not a great honor, but boy, is it a great opportunity. Ralph, this is a legal issue, and you're our legal eagle, so take it.
Okay, well, here's what happened. A couple of days ago, in fact, on September 23rd, 2014, there was a knock on my front door, and there was a lady from the Food and Drug Administration there wanting to hand deliver to me a letter dated that very day from the Federal Trade Commission and the Food and Drug Administration, I guess saving paper. So they're both on the same letter. And it was a hand-delivered letter addressed to Dr. Rima and to me and to the foundation. It was called a warning letter, and it warns us to stop talking, or at least to stop talking about Nano Silver and Ebola and CBDs and health, while we also provide those goods to our members, to the communicants of Natural Solutions Foundation. Now, the foundation,
let me interrupt.
Yep.
That means that we could talk yada, 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 or we could provide those things. But if we provide those things and talk about them and tell you what they are and what they do and why they're good for you and why they replace drugs and so on, that's the crime? Or is it just talking about these things with a scientific basis?
Well, you know, Dr. Rima, on a certain level, we won't know, because the excuse they want to use is that you can't apparently speak the truth and sell that which you speak about. Now, that's not the law as far as I understand it. In fact, as far back as the 1930s, the question was, can you put a book in a health food store that talks about the health benefits of nutrients? And the courts held, well, yes, you can, as long as you don't have them on the same shelf. And the same principle applies here as well. The government wants to say that you can't have any links or discussion of the health benefits of a nutrient without the nutrient becoming a drug. And of course, we vehemently disagree. And indeed, as those of you who have been following Dr. Rima and General Burt's work over the past 10 years, this being our 10th anniversary year, 2004 to 2014, you know that what they've been doing is they've been speaking truth to power all along. And they are compelled, and we are compelled as part of our mission to speak truth. Now, the government wants us to lie instead. Congress of the United States in 1994 adopted the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which for the first time allowed people to speak a little bit about dietary supplements.
I want to interrupt there.
Yeah.
And remind people who either may have forgotten or may not have been around at that time, because that's 20 years ago, that at that time, before the Dietary Supplements Health and Education Act was passed, it was illegal to use the word health and the word food in the same sentence. It was illegal to have a sign above a store that said health food, and goons, FDA goons with axes and clubs would come and break down the signs that said health food, because those two concepts could not, according to the FDA's interpretation of the law, be combined. There was no health to food. There was no food to health.
Exactly.
And then the SHEA, the Dietary Supplements Health and Education Act, was passed through the enormous pressure of the public, the enormous pressure of the public. Didn't mean to interrupt you,
No,
Ralph. Go
I was one of the people who lobbied for the adoption of DSHEA, knowing that it contained language which was not really good, but we had to get it through in order to stop the raids, and Congress unanimously adopted it. When they adopted DSHEA, they included language that said that you can't sell a dietary supplement unless you put on the label the magic intonation. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, prescribe for, treat, mitigate, prevent, or cure any disease. Now, the question before us is, where in the Constitution of the United States does it say Congress has the power to order us to make untruthful statements on our products? I think the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law, and I don't see any exemption in there that says, except it can order people to lie about the products they put out into the marketplace.
It can force people, except it can force people to lie on penalty of imprisonment or seizure or thug raids, so that if you speak the truth, whether to power or to people. You see, you said earlier that we've been speaking truth to power, and that's true, but it's only partly true, because we've also been speaking truth to people and helping people to realize that they are the power. It is the people who have the power. It is the people who are the power. The people who seize the power and wield the power believe that they are the power, and in fact, they're not. So that every single time that the people who are really the power have raised their voices in an appropriate and coordinated fashion, those who think that they're the power step back time after time.
Exactly. So here's what happened. So we received the letter. It's about 6 pages. Most of it is quotations from our websites, from opinion pieces we've written. And indeed, we would have to remove all of our opinions and views regarding Ebola and Nano Silver in order to satisfy the terms of that letter.
And
you know,
CBD.
and CBD, absolutely both. The rubric is that somehow commercial speech is not speech, that it can be regulated, and of course that's not what the Supreme Court has said. But getting cases to the Supreme Court is not easy. We've tried for nearly a decade to get a health freedom case up into the federal appeals courts, but the federal courts have consistently said that there's no standing. And this was the case, of course, with the 2009 swine flu vaccine, where the federal government lied. It said on one hand, this is a new virulent virus with pandemic potential, and on the other hand, it said, oh, it's just a different strain, so don't need to have any safety tests. So we know the government lies to us. We know it lies to us about our health. And most certainly, it's lying to us about what's happening in West Africa. And so as we speak, and we're compelled to speak truth, we're also compelled by our mission as part of our expressive association to offer those truths to people around us. It's easy for us to say, hey, go to your local health food store and pick up some silver, nano silver. It's tougher for us to say, this is the nano silver Dr. Rima recommends. You can get it here. It's the same competitive price you would get it anywhere else. Whether you buy it from us or someone else, it may even be better. It may even be a better price.
Actually, significantly less.
Significantly less. Yep. I agree. And yet that makes our speech no longer protected First Amendment speech, because we're coupling our speech with action, because we are engaged in expressive association. We are associating with you, our communicants, the people who support the Natural Solutions Foundation, who join our email list, who come and listen to our radio program and get our emails. And we're communicating with you as private citizens. We're not a governmental organization. We're a non-governmental organization. And in doing so, we are exercising our expressive association rights. You are exercising your expressive association rights. And if we're stopped from speaking, you're going to be the losers as well. Now, this is what's going on. Very clearly, we could say, all right, we'll remove all of the speech from our website and just have images of the bottles, of the silver bottles and the CBD products. We can say that, and maybe the government will decide that it's not in their interest at the moment to continue insisting upon censoring our speech, or we can insist that we have a right to say what we're saying, and we will be in court to see if the Supreme Court agrees.
It's even more religious.
Exactly, and the important thing here is that that this is a novel, and well, I shouldn't say novel legal theory because it's not novel. There's very strong precedent. There's an important case that I've spoken about on a number of occasions on this program, Thompson versus Western States in 2002, where the Supreme Court said some very clear things about the right of the public to have truthful information. That the government, it said, has no interest in preventing people from making what it thinks are bad decisions with truthful information. So the question is, how is the information that we're telling people untruthful? Oh no, the government doesn't say it's untruthful. The government says you are linking words about Ebola and cure to nano silver and CBDs, and therefore it makes these food substances drugs. Because you are telling what you know. And what do we know? We know that there's been a U.S. government, Department of Defense, Defense Threat Reduction Agency study that was declassified as long ago as 2009, which shows in vitro nanosilver 10 parts per million, the same nanosilver manufactured by the company that manufactures Dr. Rima's nanosilver 10 parts per million, it's the same substance, will in fact regulate the ability of the Ebola virus and, by the way, MERS and other viruses it was tested against, but it was tested against Ebola. It will regulate the ability of the virus to penetrate living cells and replicate. Now, is that the treatment of a disease? And I ask you, Dr. Rima, and answer me this if you will, is the presence of a virus in your body a disease?
No more than the presence of a bacteria.
Exactly. Yeah,
is a
it's
disease.
normal for our bodies to have literally trillions of bacteria, viruses, yeast cells, and similar critters. In fact, we would not survive if they were not part of our microbiota. We need some of those bacteria to produce very important chemicals. Some of the yeast produces B vitamins for us, and even the viruses apparently have roles to play. Well, if that virus is able to enter a cell and start replicating wildly, then at some point it will become a disease. But it's a normal function of the human body to
No,
regulate
let
this
me
sort of activity.
let me insert something.
Go ahead.
At no point will the virus become a disease, no matter how many of
Oh,
them
okay.
are.
Yep.
The symptoms that are caused by the replication and the capture of nutrients and so on in the body, that's the disease. But the virus and the presence of the virus or bacteria can never be a disease.
Okay.
So we regulate the body's normal ability to control the replication of those viruses. We're not even close to a disease. We're at normal structure and function.
And this is what nutrients are supposed to do. So the government has the science wrong, but it insists on its way of looking at the science because we have in the United States and in most other countries official science. This is what happened in the Soviet Union, you may all recall. There was something called Lysenkoism, which was the official Soviet evolutionary doctrine. There were other official Soviet doctrines in science which were contrary to reality. And it was one of the reasons that the Soviet Union finally collapsed, because its government insisted that reality was what the government said and not what it was. And so I had one of the reporters that was interviewing us today said to me, well, aren't there studies that show that silver can harm you? It can kill cells. To which I responded, show me a study made by someone who's disinterested. Of course, there is none. The one study that's been touted is one by very interested parties. So we have the usual game of pseudoscience, of science for hire, of big pharma science being used to give the bureaucrats the excuse for extending their power, while the rest of us are deemed not to have sufficient knowledge of the world that we live in to be able to speak. We're not the experts, they are. And that, of course, is false. They are the agents, the servants, and we are the people with the right to speak. The Supreme Court said that censoring speech must be the last, not the first resort. And I say, of course, to the Supreme Court, censoring speech is never the resort. But of course, that will take a real change in consciousness among Americans to reassert the real meaning of the First Amendment.
Now, there's another piece of this. Everything you said is absolutely correct, Ralph. But there's another. We have a bad echo.
You have a little bit of an echo. It's not on my end. We must be hitting an important point here, yes?
I think so. Right. And this important point, to add to what you said, is under the FDA guidelines, regulations, and pseudo laws, you can't make a point about a nutrient unless you have science to back it up. But under their circularity, you can't use the science to back up your point because somehow that's violating something or other. And therefore,
well, what it does, Dr. Rima, is if the science makes any mention of health or disease or prevention or anything like that, it's the proof that your substance is a drug. And of course, it's exactly what they're doing in the warning letter they gave to us. They're not saying that our science is false. They're not saying that the Defense Threat Reduction Agency study didn't happen. They're saying the very fact that we're saying these things makes our food into a drug because we dare speak about its health benefits.
And of course, understand that a drug must be tested and approved. A nutrient the FDA has no authority to approve a nutrient. But if a drug is unapproved, it is illegal to sell it or to recommend it. A drug costs between $300 $300 million and $500 million or more to approve.
And if it's not patentable, there's no one with any economic interest to ever get it approved.
Well, our Nano Silver is in fact patented.
Right, it has patents, though. Those patents, Dr. Rima, are about its structure, how it's made, and about its benefits as a hard surface cleaner and that sort of thing. The patents that are concerned here are the type of drug company patents that give a drug company a monopoly over a certain molecule for a certain number of years. And it's really a different type of patent.
So what we have here is circular reasoning to achieve linear suppression. And then the trustees of the Natural Solutions Foundation say, no. We say we will litigate this. We will not be suppressed. We will not allow your right to know about cancer cures, your right to know about other health options to be suppressed. Because make no mistake, right now, as a physician, if somebody calls me up and says, do you treat cancer? And I say yes, I'm in trouble because I'm not an oncologist. And then, although I have an unrestricted medical license, and then they say, well, do you use vitamin C? Do you use DMSO? Do you use nutrients? Do you use other natural methods? God help me if I say yes, because if that person is a shill for the FDA, I'll be in jail. I'll lose my license. I will have vast difficulties because I have spoken the truth. And what this litigation is about fundamentally is that the Natural Solutions Foundation will contest with the FDA that we are not, by constitution or by law or by regulation, to be coerced to lie. We will no longer avoid the C word. If we believe, for instance, that, let's say Nano Silver could cure Ebola, we have the right to say it. We have the right to be right, and we have the right to be wrong. And you have the right to know what we say and what we think.
And to make your own choices, exactly. And if you choose to voluntarily associate with us and with the Nano Silver product that Dr. Rima recommends, that's your right as well. But let's understand something. We do not propose to ever disobey the law. We intend to follow the law very carefully. We have received a 14-day warning letter. And under the law, we need to respond within those 14 days. And we are responding within the 14 days. And we will come up with, as they've required us, to come up with a plan to make sure that our websites are in compliance with the law. And we will have that plan for them. We will offer them, as permitted by the case of Pearson versus Shalala, we will offer disclosures and disclaimers in order to, as they say, save the speech, allow us to continue speaking while we provide the very nutrients that we speak about. You're all adults. You can certainly buy or not buy such nutrients. No one is asking you to do anything other than listen, think, and make your own decisions based on your own understanding.
But they're asking us to refrain from telling you what we believe fervently to be the truth. They're asking us to not undercut the genocidal impact of a stoppable disease. They're asking us to participate in genocide by withholding information because of their bullying, to which we say, I don't think so.
Listen, folks, right now in West Africa, we are watching the beginning of another Rwanda genocide. Over the next 100 days, between now and January, it is suspected, and they keep on increasing the numbers, that up to 1.4 million people will come down with Ebola in West Africa. At the normal death rates involved, we're talking about at least as many people dead as died in the Rwanda genocide. The world stood by. Was it 20 years ago when that happened? Is the world going to stand by again and just simply watch that happen? Or are they going to allow people to respond to the crisis? The WHO stated in a public statement that I think was issued on the 22nd of August that it is ethical to use even unapproved, or actually unproven is the word they used, even unproven interventions, and that such interventions should be studied. The United States government says you can't do it. Now, this is a very interesting position. We have the World Health Organization, the World Ethical, Moral, and medical community saying there is a world crisis. People must try everything. We have the United States government saying, don't you dare connect Nano Silver with Ebola.
But the truth of the matter, Ralph, is that we also have duplicitous and shameful World Health Organization saying anything can be tried, any unproven, any unexplored option except nano silver. We know in Liberia that the #2 person in the Department of Health called the isolation ward as the first dose was being poured for the first patient in the Liberian clinical trials and said, "Thou shalt not. WHO will not allow the clinical trials to be conducted with nano silver. You won't do that." And everyone who would have been saved by that died.
Indeed, Dr. Rima.
Was very ill. Some of them didn't die. Most of them died. Then we also know that in Sierra Leone, the nano silver, 200 bottles of nano silver and 100 tubes of nano silver gel that was being shipped there suddenly couldn't get there because Air France kind of forgot how to deliver express freight by air. And that parcel bounced around between Paris and New York 3 separate times without paperwork, illegally, entering various countries with nobody attending to it. How did that happen? Was that an accident, or was that related to the fact that President Koroma of Sierra Leone threw the head of station of the World Health Organization out of his country when in August the WHO chief said, "You may not use nano silver," to President Koroma and his cabinet. And the president became enraged and threw the guy out. Immediately thereafter, Air France closed its flights to Sierra Leone, even though all of the Ebola was up country at that point. There was no significant threat inside Freetown, Sierra Leone. But that package, that life-saving package, bounced around and was delivered to the wrong warehouse and so on. You think that's an accident? You think the WHO wants their genocidal success to be marred by the one thing that we know of that will cure it, that is not a vaccine, that is not a drug? ZMapp, as far as we can tell, didn't cure anything. Nursing care saved the well-nourished, well-immune functioning people who got the Ebola vaccine. But in Nigeria, somebody brought nano silver, and it was accepted with open. We weren't involved in that. It was accepted with open arms until 2 days later, suddenly there were ethical questions about the use of this safe, 15-year tested, efficient, and universal antimicrobial. And that wasn't okay. There were ethical questions. Yes, there are ethical questions. They are the ethics of the people who are killing now Africa, soon the US, Canada, Sweden, Chile, wherever. Because if you think it's not going to spread, think again. And if you don't have nano silver, and if you don't have the right to know about nano silver, then you're headed for a FEMA camp or an extermination camp, or as Mike Adams is calling them, death camps in Liberia, where they simply forcefully remove the victims from their homes and they sequester them for, quote, rudimentary care, which means they get to lie on cots in sweltering environments and die a hideous death. Sounds like a FEMA camp to me.
Indeed, Dr. Rima. And what we're seeing right now is the final death struggle of the drug pushers, the drug companies and their cronies in the federal government agencies. These two groups, and we know they're the same group of individuals, they go back and forth between the Monsantos and the Mercks and the FDA and the FTC. this revolving door of very well-paid, well-credentialed individuals who believe that the most efficient way of dealing with pandemics is to reduce the human population, less victims and less vectors. These people are now struggling for their lives. If nanosilver is allowed to be understood for what it really is, the nutrient that upregulates the immune system, then their reign is over.
That's right.
And it's really, and when you add CBDs to that, you have a 1-2 punch that can deal with so many of the medical issues that people face, and do so in a nutritional approach, not in a drug approach. This is the real threat that nanosilver really, and this is the reason why this battle is so important. And so I have to call upon you to help. We've set up a legal defense fund. We have a web page that you can go to make a donation. It is www.donate.drrimatruth. That's DRRIMA truth.com. That page will allow you to make donations, and you can also get some nano silver and soon other products there. But its primary focus is to allow you to support this important battle. The object here is nothing less than freeing us from government censorship when it comes to telling the truth about the health benefits of food substances.
It's very interesting. When you combine CBD and the warning letter that we received, now there were 2 other warning letters that day. One went to Young Living Essential Oils out of the Denver office of the FDA, and the other went to doTERRA Essential Oils, also out of the Denver office. Ours was out of New Jersey. This indicates that this was a higher level collaboration. It wasn't just the Denver office on a tear. This was from above. All 3 of these warning letters were issued, and all 3 of them take exception to the fact that Ebola is mentioned in conjunction with various immune support, thieves oil, and so on, cinnamon oil. Now, the only one that, as I read it, and you, Ralph, perhaps can correct me here, but as I read the 3 warning letters, the only one where the FDA was saying, "Thou shalt not refer to science," was ours. Indeed. Because we were the ones referring to the Department of Defense science, where we're not allowed to have an opinion and unless we have science, and we're not allowed to refer to science to back up our opinion. You see the circularity. But this is, as you say, this is the death battle for the hegemony of the controllers, because CBD and nanosilver deal with inflammation, with pain, with infection. They deal with many diverse diseases, because they deal with the causal level of those diseases. And so my estimate, my sincere belief, is that approximately 95% of the drugs that are used outside of the emergency room or the surgical suite would be replaced by free and easy access to CBDs and to nano silver. Now, if you're the pharmaceutical, and that makes vaccines unnecessary, well, they're unnecessary anyway, that pulls the rug out from the rationale for vaccines, which is bogus. If you're the pharmaceutical industry, you're going to fight pretty hard to keep this stuff from getting out. But the truth always gets out. We have the internet, and as long as we have the internet, and as long as we have you, and as long as we have your support, then you know that you can trust us, and we know that we can trust you. This is a mutual support system. And yeah, this is going to be expensive. We're going to have to go to court for your right to know about cancer cures and have the truth spoken about them. Your right to know about natural treatments for MS, or for arthritis, or for you name it, or just for maintaining health. You're right to know about true anti-aging regenerative options, because nutrients, things that the body uses to support its normal structure and function, are the most successful economic competitors to drugs that exist. And the battle's going to be tough, but it is worth it, because, as we say over and over, health freedom is your first freedom. And this is a direct attack on your health freedom, on your right to use the C word, on your right to say something prevents. Well, if you take folic acid in sufficient amounts and you're pregnant, it will prevent the development of spinal bifida in your baby. No question about it, except you're not allowed to say that. I just did.
Well, of course, the folic acid relationship to neural tube defects are allowed in some way. There are a handful of health claims that can be made because Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw forced their way up to the federal appellate court, and because the people at Western States Pharmacy forced their way up to the Supreme Court and got positive rulings that really should protect us all. And you know, years ago, we called for the divesting of food authority from the FDA. And we call for that again. The FDA should not have authority over our food. There may have been some rationale, assuming, of course, there's a clause in the Constitution that says Congress can control what we put in our bodies, which it doesn't. But assuming for a second that they have this authority, there may have been some rationale in the 1930s to putting food and drugs in the same agency, because all of our drugs came from foods in those days. But there is no such rationale now, when food and nutrition are the chief competitors to drugs, and that agency needs to be divested of any authority over food, and the sooner the better, because we are hurting folks. When you have an agency that is so divorced from humanity that it's actually banning the use of wooden cheese aging boards, which have been used for literally thousands of years and which produce cheese that have beneficial microbiota on them, and insisting that people use stainless steel and plastics with all the dangers of plastics interacting with the cheeses, to give us dead food instead of living, vibrant, healthy food. You understand that we are dealing with people who are not just stupid bureaucrats. They are evil, stupid bureaucrats. And they will sit on their positions, which is that they alone are the experts and nobody knows anything else. And if you dare to disagree with them, you are a vaccine refuser. You are something evil. You are something that no one should hear from. Such supposed bastions of freedom as the Guardian in England and Reason Magazine in the United States both had articles within a few short weeks of each other, almost as though it were planned, attacking anyone who would question vaccine science and saying that those people should not be allowed to publish, that if they write comments should not be published, they should be cut off completely from the discussion. Now, this is the sort of mentality we're dealing with, a mentality that will allow hundreds of people a day to die in West Africa, but will not allow a clinical demonstration of a simple, natural solution.
And we are asking people to do something else. Not only do we need your support, and we do need your support, but we also need you to take action. We need you to go to tinyurl.com/don't stop nano silver. That's an action item. And every time you click submit, a group of people, including Margaret Chan, who is the despicable director of the World Health Organization, will receive an email from you with your letter saying, how dare you condemn people to death and refuse to conduct fair, internationally observed clinical trials. How dare you say that anything may be used except that which will work. I call forth a time of retribution before the World Court for Margaret Chan, for the head of Health and Human Services, for the head of the FDA, for the head of the CDC, for the head of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, whose Global Health Security Initiative, GHSI, is based on the premise that in order to protect people from pandemics, you have to kill them. And that is exactly what is happening in Africa. That is precisely what is happening in Africa. They are being protected out of life. And we are being protected into an epidemic that will serve the genocidalists. Oh, she's just ranting. No, my friends, I am not. The policy of population reduction by the World Health Organization called sustainability is clear for anyone to read in the Agenda 21 documents. And if you want to, if you're interested, and you should be, you can go, by the way, you can hear that I am in the process of losing my voice. You think I've been speaking a lot? I have been. You can go to www.truthaboutagenda21.com, and there you will find the definitive documents from them that make it clear what their agenda is. And their agenda is the reduction of the population. Now, a lot of people talk about the Georgia Guidestones. And those Georgia Guidestones are pretty weird and pretty scary and pretty consistent with UN and US depopulation policy. Well, apparently, a new addition was made to the Georgia Guidestones, which talks about reducing the population to 500 million people. And that new addition was a date, 2014. And to me, those numbers on the Georgia Guidestones spell EBOLA.
Indeed. This could be an indication that the global genocidalists feel that they've done finally what they've been trying to do for so long. You know, we need to pity the poor genocidalists. They've been trying to kill off the human population for decades, and they just can't do it. No matter how many people die, more people keep on getting born. General Burt Stubblebine, president of our foundation, says he's identified 3 or 4 times over the past 15 years when there was an attempt to weaponize a disease to create the one thing, other than thermonuclear devastation, of course, the one thing that can really reduce the human population, a world pandemic. The last world pandemic was a piker. 50 million people died in the influenza 1918. You know, and while an impressive number, more than were killed in the war, it certainly didn't even slow down the increase in population. The Black Plague killed a third of the population of Europe. The plague of Justinian killed half the population of Constantinople, the capital of the Roman Empire. These diseases have a reduced population repeatedly, but not in any significant way since modern hygiene and modern nutrition. You know what ended, Dr. Rima, I think you'll confirm this for me, what really ended the epidemic diseases of past centuries was hygiene and nutrition, not the pseudoscience of vaccination.
And we have published a number of times the official U.S. government graphs of incidence of disease and introduction of the vaccine for that disease. And what you see is a sharply declining incidence of smallpox, of typhoid, of typhus, of measles, of mumps. And the decline is before of hepatitis. The decline is before the introduction of a vaccine, but after the introduction of clean water and after the general availability of high protein foods and sanitation running flush toilets and so on, cholera, for instance. That happened, and then the vaccines are introduced, and in almost every case, that curve, which has been coming down sharply, rebounds.
And indeed, the way it rebounds, Dr. Rima, General Burt identified as what he calls malignant oscillations, which you can find on our website, drrimatruthreports.com. Go to the blog section. And in that section, General Burt uses a chart, just as you said. It shows the other half of the curve where the number of measles in the United Kingdom starts to go up in a wave after wave after wave. And each wave is, a decade long or almost a decade, and each wave is bigger than the one before it. And he calls those malignant oscillations. He says it's a deadly confluence of technologies that's pushing the world into a catastrophe, the perfect storm of mega deaths. And so we've had this warning that we really need to take seriously. And we see that it's 2014 is when the Georgia Guidestones think something worth memorializing is happening. Something worth memorializing, for future generations. It happened in that year.
I think something worth happening is memorializing. They have finally stepped over the boundaries of reality. The FDA has given us standing to sue by giving us this warning letter. When actually 2 days ago, Ralph called me and he was very excited. And he said, we have a warning letter. This is exactly the opportunity we need. Now we have standing to sue. They have given us the opportunity to take them down.
Indeed. And we have to, and we're not just saying that the agencies need to be taken down because they insist that people lie instead of telling the truth. But Congress itself, the weak-willed, wimpy Congress of the United States, which is incapable of balancing its budget, incapable of giving us peace, incapable of doing almost anything, it's capable of doing a lot of damage. And in 1994, when it sought to exercise its power and force people to communicate falsely by the way it structured that law, it really set in motion several things. First of all, it gave us enough breathing space, because the FDA was thrown off for a couple of decades, to develop a vibrant natural products industry in the United States, which has meant a lot of good for a lot of people. And secondly, it's given us an opportunity to build up circles of influence involving millions of Americans and people around the world. And now it's time for those circles of influence to come together. We need you to circulate the podcast version of this radio program. We need you to circulate the information that calls for the Legal Defense Fund to be set up. We ask you to go to www.donate.drrimatruth.com, and there you'll be able to make that donation that'll help us continue this important struggle. It's exactly what is needed right now at this moment, when the genocidalists are rubbing their hands together gleefully, salivating at the thought of mega death. If people do nothing, a million people will probably be dead by January. And you said,
yes. An evaluation. I read a statistical prediction. Now, it could be wrong. It could be much worse than this. But I read a statistical prediction that says that even if the Ebola virus does not go airborne, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
Oh, yes.
Even so, the statistical prediction is that 2 billion people will die by mid-2016 from Ebola. Well, they won't die if they know and if they have access to Nano Silver. Indeed. They won't die 10 parts per million. They won't die if they understand that this is a preventable, treatable, resolvable, dare I say, curable, weaponized plague. But the fly in the ointment of the genocidalists is a silver fly.
Indeed.
Not any silver silver. Now, we're not talking about colloidal silver. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We're not talking about other nano silvers. Maybe they'll work, but maybe they won't. Would you really want to chance your life and that of your dear loved ones on something that might work or might not work, when something that we believe will work costs 26 cents a dose?
Indeed.
Are you insane?
Crazy. Dr. Rima, we have about 5 minutes before the end of this half of the program. Right. Maybe we should, at this moment, start off by reminding people that the FDA tells us we can't talk about the real science. They're not allowed to talk about the Department of Defense sponsored study that shows that that nano silver 10 parts per million regulates the replication of Ebola viruses. Well, they're not going to like this either. Dr. Rima found another study. And Dr. Rima, in the next couple of minutes, do you want to announce what we're going to be sending out? Tomorrow's e-blast will have in it, but announce it now.
And if you want this e-blast, put your email information in at nsfmarketplace.com. Do that now, because you'll get this blast tomorrow. This is a real blockbuster. I found a report by one of the Defense Department's research institutes that says that Ebola is already airborne, but it's not very efficient at being airborne in the tropics. When it comes to the colder climates, it will have the airborne stability of the flu. It will transmit by droplets. And then we're not talking about 2 billion. We're talking about I don't know how many billion. Now, you need these websites. The first website you need is donate.drrima.com.
It's drrimatruth.com, Dr. Rima.
Sorry, drrimatruth.com. We're going to need your war chest, big time. The second thing you need is www.nsfmarketplace.com. It's a PayPal-free website because PayPal doesn't want you to have nano silver or CBD. PayPal is part of the globalist cabal. And the third thing you need is the action item, which is tinyurl.com/don't stop nano silver. But there's one more. When you go to tinyurl.com, stop Ebola, you will see the research we're talking about. And if you don't spread this, then you're allowing other people to die.
So that other tiny URL, and of course on the podcast we'll have all these available, is tinyurl.com stop Ebola. Stop Ebola. And then the other tiny URL is don't stop nano silver. Those are the alternatives we have, and we'll make sure that you all have that access.
Tell people how they can get the podcast and how they can send it around.
That's excellent. Our podcasts are posted usually the day or so after the Thursday night program on our YouTube channel. And we even have a tiny URL that gets you directly to the playlist, the archive playlist on our YouTube channel. And that tiny URL is simple. It's tinyurl.com/DRTR, Dr. Rima Truth Reports, DRTR archive. So you go to that page, or just go straight to youtube.com/natural solutions. You'll get to our page, and you'll be able to find the archives there as well. So either way.
Is this your battle? Yeah, this is your battle. This is the battle of the century, because the FDA has finally overstepped its bounds, given us standing to sue, and says we can't tell you the truth, as the U.S. Department of Defense research says it is the truth. Wahoo! I'm so happy they did this. And now we need to go forward as warriors, if you will, warriors for truth. And this is a way to stop oppression, tyranny, and to stop a pandemic.
Indeed, a pandemic that the head of the CDC says is inevitable in the United States. And a pandemic with a virus, which is so virulent that a very small amount penetrating into cells and replicating can cause a very big problem. Well, Dr. Rima, it looks like it's about 5 minutes to the end of the program, I suppose we go to the top of the hour before they cut us off.
Usually, our guest will be Dane Wigington for the second hour. Why don't we go on talking about this? Because the climate engineering that is devastating so much of the Northern Hemisphere is quite intentional and is, as Dane likes to say, the hole that is sinking the entire ship. And we felt that this was so important that we had to have Dane on. So we will be back after the end of this hour. There'll be a brief intermission. Now, if you are listening and you are not yet on our subscription list, then you're making a mistake. You need to join us. Thank you.